This is the place where the magic of Disney meets the magic of the real world through wellness and spirituality. I'm your host, Kitty Packman, and this is Spiritually Ever After. Welcome back to Spiritually Ever After. It has been a while since our last episode, but I am so excited to talk about today's topic. So this is a family therapist take on Star Wars episodes 4 through 6. If you don't know me, I am the host, Kitty Packman. It is so nice to meet you. And happy May the 4th. I know I'm a little bit belated. I'm recording this on May 5th. But it is a big week in the Star Wars fandom. And I know I posted on Instagram yesterday, kind of talking about how I've never necessarily felt super comfortable calling myself a Star Wars person. And maybe you can relate to that. It kind of feels like, when do you know enough about a fandom to call yourself a fan? And so there was definitely some imposter syndrome preparing for this episode. And yet I think that's the whole point, is to give my take, because I think everyone probably has some variation of those feelings. So excited to dive in. But if you're new here, we always like to start every episode with a little drop-in meditation. I know sometimes people get scared when they hear the word meditation, but I promise it's not intimidating. Just a little way to get back into your body, get out of your head, anchor in with the breath. And we're going to talk today a lot about how Star Wars feels very spiritual, very aligned with a lot of the work that I do as a spiritual life coach and transformation mentor. And so I'm excited to start with this. So wherever you are, if you're listening or if you are watching, if you are able to close your eyes, I'm going to invite you to do that. Obviously, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. Keep yourself safe. You might want to pause if you want to actually do this meditation, or you can just gently let yourself breathe along. If you are uncomfortable closing your eyes, or if that feels, maybe a little bit re-traumatizing, or if you're just like, I don't really want to meditate, I don't know about this, you can also just gently look down at the floor. So whatever it is that feels good for you, you can get into that position now. If you are sitting, maybe putting your feet flat on the floor, or sitting cross-legged if you prefer. And if you can sit up straight with your spine, nice and tall and straight. And that's really just going to allow your internal energy system, your chakras, your human design centers, everything to really just align and fall back into place. So just really anchoring in here, intentionally holding your body into a position that may or may not be comfortable, and that's okay. And again, closing the eyes or looking down now, whatever feels good for you. And just starting to bring your focus to your breath. Breathing deeply in through your nose, filling up your body with fresh new air. Holding it for a second when you reach the top. And then letting it out through the mouth, maybe sighing it out or shaking the shoulders if that feels good. Again, breathing deeply in through the nose, feeling that refreshing, beautiful, new, revitalizing life force energy come back into your body. Maybe this is the first moment you've spent today really being in your body. So just take this time. Again, holding it when you reach the top if that feels good, and letting it out. Maybe thinking release or letting go as you let go of that breath. Again, just breathing deeply, being in your body, settling in, noticing what it feels like. Noticing if your mind wants to create some stories to drag you away from this moment. Just noticing them and choosing to come back into your body through the breath. And this really is as simple as meditation can be. It doesn't have to be this long 20-minute practice or anything complicated. It can just be as simple as bringing your attention to your breath and to your body, and really choosing to consciously be here in this moment. So breathing deeply and really giving yourself that gift, right? The gift of being here in this moment. So taking one more deep breath here, giving it all you've got, filling yourself up, holding it, reaching that climax in the breath and in the body, and then letting it out. Maybe releasing the shoulders, shaking them out, making a little noise if you need to sigh it out. And then coming back to this present moment, opening the eyes if your eyes were closed. Maybe wiggling your fingers a little bit or your toes to come back in. And just taking a second here to notice how you feel. Notice, do you feel a little less tension, a little less stressed, maybe a little less anxious than when we first started? Again, just a beautiful invitation for you to recognize you don't even need to listen to me or watch this to meditate, although I would love for you to stick around and keep doing that with us. But you can really just, consciously come back to your breath at any minute and lead yourself through that. So thank you for dropping in with me. I always feel like that's super powerful. I already feel like I feel so much more grounded and ready to talk about this, even though, again, I still totally feel like, can I talk about Star Wars? I don't know if I can talk about Star Wars. I think it's also just that Star Wars especially has a lot of sort of like gender dynamics, and we're going to get into some of that, but that certainly there are girls and women who identify as Star Wars people. And yet I think that at least when I was growing up, it felt like, I don't know, this thing that like the nerdy guys aren't gonna let girls in unless they're like smart enough and they know every single detail. I think that's what it is. And especially as a girl who very much identified with and felt validated by seeing myself as the smart girl, I never felt like I knew enough. I don't know the difference between the droids. I don't know the difference between these all these different species. I don't even know if you call them species. And I think that that is what made, made me and still makes me feel like, do I have a right to call myself that? And yet I have so many friends that are such Star Wars people and a lot of girls and women in the community who are like, of course you get to say you're a Star Wars person. Of course we love it. Of course we want to go and bring you to Galaxy's Edge and take all of the pictures. This is actually the dress that the first time that I went to Galaxy's Edge and had this incredible experience. It was on my solo trip last May, 2 years ago, May, 2 years ago this month. Holy macaroni, time flies. But this was the dress that I was wearing and just had such an incredible experience. And I think that was one of those first moments where I was there with my friend Liz, who is such a Star Wars person and has been her whole life. And it was such a validation moment of like, you get to be a part of this. There's no exclusion. You don't need to feel like you're on the outskirts. So this is your invitation if you've ever felt like that. Um, if you are familiar with the podcast, you might know that a lot of times I do these like kind of stream of consciousness, just talk through every single thought that I had when I was watching a movie. Obviously, I'm not going to do that today because then this would be hours and hours long. As it is, this might be a long one. I'm going to try to do my best to speak quickly, and I do as a New Yorker, but there's a lot in these three movies. They're obviously long movies to begin with. But I felt like it'd be better to really give you an overview and give you kind of like the main themes that I see, especially as a family therapist, because especially when we got to Return of the Jedi, I was like, this scene between Vader and Luke literally feels like a family therapy session. Like, I'm like, I should just be there helping facilitate this. No one has to die. Anyway, and I will say, as I say that, there are probably going to be some spoilers in this. So if you have not watched episodes 4 through 6, go watch them if you want to watch before you listen. If you're someone who's like, I don't think I am a Star Wars person, I don't think I vibe with that, but you want to see if you might be, then you're invited to listen. And it's funny that as I say that, because one of the things that I wanted to mention is, my relationship with Star Wars and kind of who I am in my background. So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist turned life coach and entrepreneur. And so as a family therapist, we see things from the systems perspective, the systemic perspective. So what does that mean, right? What it means is that we actually see everything from that kind of like zoomed out bird's eye view. How can I look at the entire system? Right? How can I look at this family as a system, or even if it's a couple as a system, or even an individual? How can I look at this one person as a member of many systems, because we all are, right? Our family, our work, our school, our friends, our relationships, tons of systems, our country. And we have systems even within us. You know, if you're familiar with internal family systems, it's a type of therapy that looks at how we have these different parts within us and how there's sort of these, manager parts who kind of do exactly what our, maybe our higher self thinks it wants to do, but it's maybe a little bit ego driven, right? Like, no, 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 you have to just get it all done, the perfectionist kind of. And then we have these other parts that kind of just like to, the exiles, the ones that like to just mess it all up and do whatever they want. And they're messy and they don't care and they're shadowy, right? And then we have our firefighters who come in when those exiles have done what they're not supposed to and they have to clean everything up and make it all look better. And so looking at the individual as a system of all of those parts, right? And so this systemic perspective allows you to really see things completely differently, see the whole world differently. And if you're a human design person, this really is kind of how projectors naturally see the world. So of course I was drawn to become a family therapist as a projector, right? Because it is that zoomed out bird's eye perspective, right? And just seeing the bigger picture. And so as I was watching these movies, I was like, I would love for someone, and obviously that someone would have to be me, right? To create, a genogram or a map of all of these power structures and then the family structures. And if you've never heard of what a genogram is, it's kind of like a family tree, but brings in mental health and substance use and family dynamics and relationship dynamics and lets you look at how these ancestral patterns are passed down. And I think it would be fascinating to do in these movies. So I might have to do that at some point. If that's something you would want, let me know. And maybe I'll have to, even do that on social media or something like that. But my relationship with Star Wars essentially is that when I was young, probably like maybe 6 or 7 years old, my dad started to show me and my sister and my brother these first three movies because episode one came out when I was 7, I think. I'm checking my notes. Yes, it was 1999, but it was May of 99. So I was 7 years old. So I was pretty young. And I definitely remember that we had watched the first few movies before we went and saw episode one in the theaters. So I remember just thinking they were like action movies that I really wasn't too into. I wasn't totally against them. And I liked that they felt like they made you think a little bit and had a little bit of this nerdy element. Cause again, I very much identified as a nerd at the time. But I don't really remember them much. But I definitely remember going to see episode two and being very into it. And obviously like the love aspect and the, just that has always and forever been my favorite thing in the world is just like romantic love. So I very much could get down with episode two. So that's the first one that I actually really remember seeing. Um, but I guess I had technically seen certainly episodes 4 through 6 and 1 through 3. And then from there, I don't really know what I've seen. I know I saw, oop, I totally should have looked up the name of which one I saw before I said this. Maybe it was Rogue One. One of those ones that was like a one-off that came out and it would have probably come out 2017, 2018-ish because I saw it 2019 with essentially like the first Tinder date that I went on after my 5-year relationship ended. I went and hung out with this guy and we watched that movie. So that's why I literally couldn't even tell you which one that is. So I will certainly be rewatching all of them. That's really my plan here is to rewatch them in the order that they were created because I am such a sucker for like deep, thoughtful artistry. And I cannot, like the logical part of my brain cannot wrap my brain around why this order and how this makes sense. And so I'm really excited to see that and to do that with all of you through this to see kind of like what comes up through it. Um, but definitely my family was very into Star Wars. My uncle, who is almost 20 years younger than my dad, was a huge Star Wars fan. And so my dad, as he was, when my uncle was very young, took him to go see all the movies. And it was like this whole thing. It was a big part of my parents' relationship that they went and took him to one of those, like, where they played all three of the first movies in a row at the movie theaters and all that sort of stuff. So my uncle was very into it, actually named his son Luke, which I think is really cool. And then my younger brothers were very, very into it. I mean, my brother Matt, who's a few years younger than me, was into it when we were young, but my much younger brothers who are now how I don't understand, but 13 and 15, they were like obsessed with Star Wars when they were little. And so it was a very big part of their upbringing. And that's when I watched them full time. So I sort of got it from them, even though I still felt like I couldn't call myself a Star Wars person at that point. And there was such a cute moment where Riley, the youngest one, he was probably like, I don't know, 4 or 5 at the time. And a new movie had come out and he was like, "Oh, did you see whatever?" And I was like, "Oh no, I haven't seen it yet." And he's like, "Oh, so and so dies." And I was like, "Oh, Riley, that's called a spoiler. That is not what you want to do." I was like, "This is an important moment, an important life lesson." So there's definitely a lot in our family around Star Wars. And so again, just to kind of justify if you're someone who also feels like you don't have a right to call yourself a Star Wars person, it's like here I am as someone who has all of this kind of like rich family history around it and still doesn't feel like I have a right to call myself a Star Wars fan. So pretty funny, right? And I'm just checking my notes, seeing if there's anything else before we actually get into this. Yeah, again, just like I think that this concept of when do I know enough to be able to call myself a fan is very true for a lot of different fandoms. I know for a long time that's how I felt about Harry Potter. I actually didn't read the Harry Potter books until I was in college. I had started the first book when it first came out and then just didn't finish it. And then it sort of saved it as like a way of using it for Never Have I Ever. I probably talked about this actually when I did the episode, the first episode on Harry Potter on here, which of course is reminding me like I need to get back to that series too. Let me know if you want me to get back to the Harry Potter series on here. But I think again, I didn't feel like I could call myself a Harry Potter fan for a long time and still sometimes feel like, oh, I need to reread the books because I don't know enough, which is so fascinating. Like, why do we do that, right? And I feel like our generation, especially millennials, we like to cling on to it. Let me know if you agree. But it's like we put ourselves into these boxes where it feels comfortable to be able to call ourselves a Harry Potter fan or a Star Wars fan or a Disney fan or a Taylor Swift fan. And then it's like shun the person who knows less than us to prove that we really are the fan. And it's like, that's so old and outdated. And that is not what any of us actually wants, right? We all want to just belong and feel like we're accepted for who we really are. And so this is your invitation. If you have been waiting to call yourself a Star Wars fan or a insert whatever fandom here, this is your invitation to do that. All right. Yes. So, like I said, I'm going to talk main themes and points that stood out to me as a family therapist and as a businesswoman rather than stream of consciousness because, I mean, we're already who knows how long into this episode and I still got a lot to say. So, I have five main themes that have sort of emerged over these first three movies. So, the first one is kind of like the power of hope and resistance in the face of oppression, right? So there's a ton of points here. I'm like, let me fix my notes so that I can actually see what I'm saying. Perfect. So first of all, obviously, just in general, the whole rebellion against the empire, right? And how they take these crazy actions like blowing up Alderaan, right? And then obviously the destroying of the Death Star, like major actions that bring the group together, right? And so it's kind of like sometimes in those moments of extreme darkness, like a planet being blown up, it's like that's what actually is necessary to spark that, resistance, that revolution. And I think so much watching these movies with what's going on right now in the US and around the world felt really poignant and powerful and also a little scary. And again, when you're seeing it from that bird's eye view, it's like, oh, it's just a little, hits a little too close to home. Um, and then obviously we have characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi who have this like calm, wise energy, right? And they are the leaders that we need to emerge in Yoda too, right? Who can just remind us that actually all you need to do is keep calm. It's like, yes, there is a reason to be afraid. We're not gonna like sugarcoat or bypass or pretend that the fears aren't real. Those fears are there. And if you give in to that and you focus on that, you can't regulate your emotions. You can't think straight. You will not be able to connect to the force. You will not be able to actually help people. So, again, just so salient right now, right? And obviously, Princess Leia's leadership, I mean, throughout all of it is just boss. Is just so boss. And I think it really highlights that like rebel, it just she's so cool. She's so cool. And then the kind of love triangle relationship development between Leia and Han Solo and Luke is just fascinating. And again, just really seeing how no matter what's going on personally with them, they're always like persevering together and coming together and just like that really kind of like collective hope together. You know what I mean? And that when one of them maybe is faltering, it's like they know they can lean on their friends to be able to get through it. And, again, especially when the odds are stacked against them, which obviously they are I mean, pretty much throughout all of these movies, if you just look at sheer force and size. And yet that's where, again, at least for me, we know it's not, right? Like, I think that love will always be more powerful than evil or darkness or whatever word you want to use for that. And I love the, Yoda, like, wars not make one great. I mean, I just love Yoda overall. I could probably talk about Yoda for an entire episode. But again, it's like they're having to rely on the power that they're getting from these small victories, right? It's not necessarily like blowing up the Death Star every minute, certainly not, right? It's like these tiny little things that if you looked at the big picture, it could be tempting to give up because it's like that is so minute. They have so much more power, they have so much more money, they have so much more resources, whatever it is. And yet it's not, right? Like we know that again, you can just feel, and that's that classic underdog story too, right? It's like they have that power they have the power of like the current of everything is always changing, the tides are always shifting. And so the ones in power will not always be in power, right? We talked about Leia, obviously, and just like her role as a leader, but especially as, a female leader. And I also think here, too, it's important to point out music as a powerful force of bringing people together, and that it doesn't have to always be this, like, what you'd think of as powerful and like important moment. Sometimes it is just like these moments of connection and recreation and fun. And I love the Oga's Cantina song, so I love that that was in it. I didn't realize that it was in it. Like, of course it should be. But I love that. I love that there are these kind of like fun, powerful scenes when it's not necessarily like the super action-packed scene. So that is the first theme. The second theme is this sort of like journey and inner growth of characters through their relationships, right? And again, just in general, there's very much this like hero's journey throughout these movies, but specifically through relationships, which I think is really important to look at, especially as family therapists. So first, obviously, we have Luke's transformation going from this like really young, naive farm boy who really only knew like his little tiny life to becoming this incredibly powerful Jedi. Really goes through the kind of like journey of that inner awakening that he has to take, right? And embracing his greater purpose. And I love that scene of watching him really step into his power and really hone his like psychic and intuitive gifts, right? And honestly, for me, in the first two movies, like, I don't think there's anything attractive about Luke. Sorry, I'm not sorry if that's how you feel. But his confidence in Return of the Jedi actually almost makes him attractive for me, which I thought was pretty cool, right? Like to just remember that, again, especially if you're someone who like is so caught up on a certain feature of yours, or you feel like you're, to this or to that, or not enough this or not enough that to be, attractive or to be powerful or to be whatever, to be confident. Like confidence is a skill that you build and it makes you more attractive. It makes you more powerful. So learn from that because I think that's an important lesson. And then we have Obi-Wan's, kind of like quiet wisdom and being this like central figure of really the kind of like wise old, older, like, I would say crone, but that's usually a woman, or maybe not. Maybe that's just my perception being in the sort of like divine feminine world. But I really think he just gives such safe energy, right? And I think that's how Luke is able to step into his own power is through Obi-Wan's, example, right? And then obviously Han Solo's evolution from kind of being this like selfish, very independent smuggler to becoming this hero, right? That his friends and everyone can really rely on. And I love that he just knows people all over the galaxy. I feel like that's very cool. And just feels like, like that he has chosen to, in a way, sort of like give up his old way of being in order to be vulnerable and trust and, believe in those connections that he's built and the relationships that he's built. So I love that. And obviously, I know I mentioned earlier, but like the tension, the romantic tension between Han and Leia, and then awkwardly a little bit with Luke, right? Like there's a lot going on here again as a family therapist. But I think there's just like so much throughout all of the movies. And right, like I think I can't remember if it's in episode 4 or 5, but where Leia asks Han to let go of her. And I was sort of like, is that like a boundary setting? Is that like a flirty thing? And there's just so much and so many different layers to it. And again, I think it's all kind of up to our interpretation. But I think that obviously Luke sort of being involved just deepens all of it and complicates all of it, right? And then obviously we have this sort of like declaration that Leia is the other hope. And I think that's beautiful. And then when Yoda, and again, I mean, there's going to be a lot of spoilers in this, but Yoda basically telling Luke as he's dying, like, oh yeah, surprise, you weren't the only hope. Leia is. She's your sister. Peace out. And then he just disappears. I thought it was fascinating. I was like dying at this. But yeah, I think it's just so well done. And I loved seeing how the titles were sort of woven through. I think I like hadn't really thought about the titles very much prior to making this. I was like, oh, now I get why that's the name of the movie. So and then I really was curious, like, are interspecies relationships normal in this galaxy? Like, how does that work? I also wanted to know, what does a human being mean in this galaxy? Because at one point, I think it's Han Solo says about Jabba the Hutt, like, Jabba, you're a wonderful human being. Like, I don't know if anyone would call Jabba the Hutt a human being, so I'm confused on that one. But yeah, and then obviously you can't talk about relationships without talking about Luke and Vader. So again, like I said earlier, I think this really felt like a family therapy session to me, the battle between them. But I love how as soon as Luke has found out that Darth Vader's his dad, the minute he sees him, he starts calling him father. I feel like that's so like such a perfect tactic if you have unhealthy power dynamics, if there's a parent who is like that, like kind of like narcissistic tendencies to be able to just like use it right back at them to be like, nope, that doesn't mean anything to me. And yet, of course, Vader calls him son right back. So he's like, he's ready for it. He's not faltering when Luke does that. So I think it's a very clear, like, even match of power here. Except I think that Darth comes into it in complete denial and thinks that he has so much more power than Luke, right? Because he has this power over. And I think that's a big part of this, right? And we're going to talk about power in a little bit too, but this idea of having power over others versus true power that comes from within. And I think that is really the downfall when, anyone kind of goes to the dark side, if you will. It's like this idea that you think that because you've gotten good at manipulating others, because you've gotten good at convincing other people to do what you want or to get the situation to go that you want, that you feel like you're the most powerful person. And then it becomes your downfall because your ego can no longer actually see the bigger picture and see what's really going on, right? Whereas when your power is being sourced from within, when you are tapped into your soul and you are speaking from your truth, no one can ever take that from you. Like, there is nothing that anyone can do. And someone who is only used to power over others will feel the difference. They may not admit it out loud, but they're going to feel the difference and they're going to be shaking in their boots. And that's exactly what happens here, is that Darth Vader comes in thinking he's more powerful than Luke. And instead, what do we see, right? We see Luke be a precious little angel baby and literally put his own life and everyone else's life on the line, knowing that his dad will save him. Like, I could actually cry thinking about it again. Whew, because I think that's really beautiful, right? He didn't even grow up with this person as his dad. And yet I think it really speaks to how when you are tapped into this force for good, for love, right? For truth, you just know, and there's nothing that anyone could do to tell you otherwise, even when logically it makes absolutely no sense. I also love when Darth Vader says something about Leia, and I don't even remember what it is that Luke says, but that's when he comes back up and finally starts to actually fight. And he was giving such, what did you say about my brother? Like, I was like, he's like, what did you say about my sister? So good. But I think this is really just that like ultimate proof of good and love that it always pays off, right? And especially then seeing Luke fully crying about it, I think that was also really beautiful too, because especially when these movies were made, we were not seeing men crying like that in movies. So love that. All right, theme number 3 is this idea of the force as a universal life force energy, right? And again, this is where it is so parallel to the work that I do as a spiritual mentor. And, even with human design, with Reiki, with the chakras, like, it's all based on this idea that everything is energy. And that when you can tap into that energy and really be in alignment with your truth, everything falls into place for you. right? And it's not about forcing or manipulating the world around you to get what you want because you've learned how. That's using it for darkness, right? It's recognizing that you were given your exact desires, your exact mission, your exact purpose, your exact gifts, your exact goals, your personality, everything for a reason for you to show up in this lifetime exactly as you are, right? And that when you're tapped into that, you can never go wrong. And so I think it is such a beautiful, beautiful, um, kind of like theme woven throughout all of these movies and how it's so spiritual. You know what I mean? So there's a quote that I love where Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "The Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together," right? And so this description of the force as surrounding us and penetrating us is very like omnipresent, right? Like we are all one, community consciousness, collective consciousness, and recognizing that we are all divinely interconnected. There's nothing we could do to be separate. And again, that separation is ego made. That separation is false and fake. I love how they talk about lightsabers as civilized weapons. At first, I was like, they are? Like, I don't know, you're cutting people's arms off, you're killing people with them. And then I was like, oh, no, I get it, right? It's more civilized compared to other weapon options. And because in order to yield that weapon, you have to have done the work. Can you imagine how different, at least America, would look if, in order to wield any sort of weapon, now I'm like, yield a weapon, wield a weapon? Is it yield or wield? Tell me. I don't know. But imagine how different America would be if, in order to have a gun or some sort of weapon, you had to first do the inner work to be in touch with your inner force and your inner truth, and to know that you will only use that when it's being used for truth and good. How different would America look, right? Yeah. So love that. And how the force really gives Jedis their strength, right? It's like only through doing this work, through building that trust, through building that interconnection, through honing in on your gifts, through spending the time, because it takes time and energy to hone those intuitive and psychic gifts. By doing that work, that's how you gain the power of the force. And it makes me think of the classic Spider-Man, like with great power comes great responsibility, right? It's kind of like you don't get that power until you've done the work to earn that, to have that, to prove that you are responsible enough for that power. So I love that. And I love that we really see that in episode 5, where we're seeing Luke training and really honing in on these gifts, while working with Yoda. All right, so the fourth theme is of power and control and fear and this temptation of the dark side, right? And going evil. And as I say that, I'm thinking of like evil from Austin Powers. Like again, it's always seen as this temptation, and certainly there are lots and lots of examples of this being tied to women throughout history. So I like how, at least in this, we've got, evil men, although classic is just always the people in power are men. And yet, hello, we have Princess Leia. So that is, again, another thing I love about these movies is that even though they were made a while ago, right? I mean, at this point, I think the first one came out in 79. So that's like, holy moly, almost 50 years ago. Every time I think about what year it is, I feel so old. But to have had a powerful woman like that is incredible, and was not necessarily what was going on at the times then. So I love that. But again, can't talk about these movies without talking about power and control and the temptation of the dark side. So obviously, Darth Vader and the Empire constantly use fear as a tactic, right? They're torturing Leia, they're literally destroying planets, and really just showing how their power is rooted in control, right? And colonialism and power over the other, right? And if you're not familiar with the 5 faces of oppression by Iris Marion Young, one of them is real or perceived violence, right? So this idea of at any minute we might, come and hurt and or kill you and your family. It keeps people in line, right? And they literally say like fear will keep them in line, right? It's used to manipulate people, and to make people forget that you actually do have the power. And that's why I love that we see Princess Leia, who is not only a woman, but a woman who technically is, right? She's a princess. So she already has power. And in theory, or at least in kind of the way that the world is right now, one might think like, she doesn't need to be involved in the rebellion. She probably can have a nice life, even if there's, the emperor taking over. I'm still unclear on the power structure overall, like the macro level power structure in this universe. So if someone can clear that up for me, like even watching episode 6, I was like, wait, I forgot there's the emperor's above Darth Vader. Is that how this works? So like someone clear that up because how does that work with Princess Leia's family being in power? Someone let me know that. As I say that, maybe I'm like, maybe Princess Leia's family is just for one of the planets and the emperor's for the whole galaxy. Someone please let me know. I really would like to know. I want to be someone mansplain it a little bit to me. Okay, I really do want to know. And I don't have time to go down the rabbit holes that I will go down to try to find these answers because I will end up God knows where on the internet. But yeah, obviously a ton around power and control and the use of fear, right? And using fear to get other people to do what you want. And again, very much the fear of the unknown, right? So not knowing what they might be able to do with the power that they have to just keep everyone in line and to just assume that people will do what they want them to do. So we then have Yoda's teachings, right? Kind of the opposite of this, right? Recognizing that no, you need to look within you for the power and talking about how the dark side is actually quicker and easier and more seductive, right? It's essentially like, let me skip a few steps. This is everyone wanting the 6 weeks to six figures and the like overnight business success rather than recognizing there is no such thing, right? There is no such thing, especially if you want a sustainable business or sustainable happiness, it's not going to happen overnight. And yet the ego, the dark side tells us, no, no, just do it this way. Skip a few steps. It's going to be easy, right? So I love that. And again, here I couldn't help but see, as a Harry Potter person, see the parallels between Vader's relationship with Luke and Voldemort's relationship with Harry and just kind of like the obsession. And I know that Voldemort is not a family member of Harry's, but it sort of feels like they are. And again, the genograms would be fascinating. And then obviously, Vader's intentional manipulation, strategic thinking, and being able to kind of like get inside the head of Luke, right? And yet Luke is sort of able to do the same thing, but not from a place of manipulation, from a place of let me understand or try to understand what's going on for my dad, because again, he's seeing it as like my dad in the moment. Let me try to figure out what's going on for him so that I can reach him and let him know that it's not too late to choose love. And I think that's really the key is that the darkness and ego will always tell you, like, you have no more time. It is right now, and you have to choose right now. And they're going to force you to choose one thing, and it's going to manipulate you to choose what they want, right? Whereas love says, actually, there's no time limit. Actually, it's never too late for you to choose. Right. And that's why that moment is so salient and so powerful when Luke is literally willing to give up everything in order to create the space for his dad to choose, like to choose again and to choose love. Oh, could cry again thinking about it. I got to stop myself here. All right. Obviously, I can't talk about power and control without talking about the slave Leia scene. Um, I, again, must have seen this when I was younger and then have seen all of the incredible cosplays and interpretations of that scene. It's fascinating to watch this because obviously she looks incredibly hot, and yet it is just all the implications and just it's a lot to take in. As a woman, it is a lot to take in. But I will say the moment that she took over that gigantic gun in her bikini outfit, I'm still not recovered. It was so good. And I think there's just a lot of moments in this where, like, if you need a break from the patriarchy killing you, you got to go watch it. So I thought that was great. Um, and then as I was watching this, especially in episode 6, I was thinking like, why is it such a classic thing to have characters die? Characters that we've grown to like die in these like big epic final battles. And I'm like, well, duh, that's the whole point of battles. I'm like, War is just so dumb and pointless and unnecessary. And I could talk about that forever and ever and ever because I just think in 2025, like, how is that still how we are deciding things, killing each other rather than finding a way to communicate like adults? Anyway, my fifth theme is unity amidst diversity, right? And this I think pairs really nicely with where we started with the hope and resistance in the face of oppression. It's recognizing that yes, we are all different. And yet, as I was preparing for this, I was like, what if instead of focusing on the differences, we actually just threw away the concept of being the same? Because there's no such thing as being the same. We are literally all unique individual human beings. And so rather than trying to look for how certain groups or certain people are different from us and try to categorize ourselves to say, I'm similar to this person, but I'm different from this person, what if instead we just threw it away and we just focused on every single person being an individual, right? And I think what's so beautiful in these movies is that there are so many different creatures and droids and species. I don't even know if that's what you would call them, right? We have like the Ewoks and the Jawas and the, whatever. Um, and that they're all coming together, right? And just representing this beautiful universal interconnectedness. And I love how some of them sort of look like humans and some totally don't. And like I said earlier, I don't really know what they would or wouldn't consider a human and who is or isn't in power, right? Because you look at Jabba the Hutt and he certainly doesn't look like a human, and yet he has a lot of power. So I just think it's fascinating. And again, to see them all kind of working together. I also thought it was interesting as I was watching, especially episode 4, like really getting back into it. I'm like, wait a minute. So C3PO is like a robot helper, and then R2D2 is like a robot computer. And one of them speaks human, but can't like look up everything. And the other one doesn't speak, but they can both understand. Like, how is this effective? And then I was like, or is this to keep one from becoming more powerful than humans? Obviously, that's a very salient conversation right now with AI. I don't really know. But obviously, they work really well together, right? And that it's kind of like when the two of them are working well with the team, they're unstoppable. And again, that just shows like I'm such a firm believer that AI or technology can never fully replace humans because humans are just something different. And it's not just humans, it's living is something different than computers and zeros and ones. We can't be reduced to zeros and ones, and animals and plants can't either. And I think that's what's really beautiful here is recognizing there's not one computer or droid that could do everything, right? They have to work together. So I think that's awesome. And, again, just seeing them all come together, right? The whole team, I think is really cool. All right, so some random musings of mine that didn't quite fit into any of those themes, but I felt like needed to still be said. So first of all, I think it's episode 4, I think it's the first one. You have stormtroopers riding on these dinosaur-looking things. I am still laughing thinking about it. They looked so dumb. And I feel like the next time that the patriarchy is getting me down, I'm just going to think about it and just crack up again because it is so good. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go find that clip. I am obsessed with the two moons. It's like I know people love this. I've seen people love this, but until I like really realized it, I'm like, oh my God, I love the two moons. Love that so much. Something about the Vader torturing Leia scene in episode 4 was giving Randall in Monsters Inc. torturing Mike Wazowski. If you know, you know. Let me know if you agree. I had to rewind, and again, I think this is episode 4 because I think I saw Darth Vader sitting crisscross applesauce. What is that about? Can someone tell me? Is that a thing? Do we ever know why he's sitting like that? Am I just seeing things? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I saw that. So let me know about that. Um, and the execution scene in episode 6, Return of the Jedi, was giving me Sabrina the Teenage Witch episode when she finds out she has an evil twin. So does that resonate for anyone? Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't know. It was like very much reminding me of that. And I want to know if King Julian and the lemurs from Madagascar, and or the minions are based on the Ewoks because I feel like they all just give similar energy, like the language, the bowing. There was a lot there, and I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if, I mean, in general, right? Like these movies were so fundamental and they just changed everything, And so I kind of feel like even if movies didn't intentionally base things off of them, they were inspired by them. But I need to go look. And lastly, just that. Honestly, I have a newfound respect for Smuggler's Run because I always thought it was a good ride, but now I'm like, oh, that was very accurate, like very, very accurate. So I loved it. So that is my thoughts on the first three movies, episodes 4 through 6 of the Star Wars series. As a family therapist, I want to know your thoughts. What did I miss? What are you surprised I didn't talk about? What do you totally disagree? What did you love? Please let me know on social media. We are spiritually underscore ever after on Instagram and spiritually ever after on TikTok, as well as on YouTube. If you are listening to this episode somewhere, if you didn't know, this is also a video podcast. So you can check this out on YouTube. Stay tuned for new episodes, including breakdown of the rest of the Star Wars movies at some point. Obviously, as I remember during this, the Harry Potter movies, we've got a lot coming, so stay tuned. And obviously, if you enjoyed this, please rate and review. It really makes such a difference. And share this episode on social media. Let me know what you thought. Message me if you have ideas or if you want to come on as a guest. And so last episode back in October, so sorry you've been waiting for so long. I gave you a trivia question and I wanted to give you the answer. So in October, I asked a true or false question of whether Coco is the highest grossing movie of all time in Mexico. And that is true. It surpassed the previous record holder, the Avengers, by grossing over $43 million. That's wild and incredible. And again, not as a animated movie, right? Like Avengers is a live action movie and Coco surpassed it. Wild. Love that. And so for today's trivia question, obviously it has to be Star Wars related, right? Where did the inspiration for Princess Leia's iconic bun hairstyle come from? I want to know. I found two different sources that sort of make sense together. So I would love to know if you know. If you know, go message me on social media. And if you leave a review from this episode, I always like to give you an emoji so that I know which episode you were reviewing from. So today's episode, please leave the planet emoji so that I know you were listening to the Star Wars episode. And again, if you enjoyed this, share this episode with someone who loves Star Wars or someone who's been wanting to get into Star Wars and needs that invitation to let themselves be a Star Wars person today, right? And I am so grateful that you were here. Thank you so much for joining. May the Force be with you. And as always, until next time, we'll see you real soon. Thank you for being here and listening. If you loved it, leave a review and/or share and tag me. I would love to connect with you. I'm spiritually underscore ever after on Instagram and spiritually ever after on TikTok. See you real soon.